Twitter Files 17. Matt Taibbi drops another one, this one involving the Global Engagement Center. We don't often talk about the GEC. Usually a lot of our time is spent with the FBI, the DOJ, DHS, CDC, and others. But today, the GEC may be the biggest problem of all of them. Elon has talked about this. We've heard others reference this entity, but who are they? What do they do? Why are they so important? Well, you can see their Twitter account, which we'll take a look at in a minute and understand what they're doing over there. But first, let's hear from James P. Rubin himself. He is the special envoy for the GEC, and he posted this on their account very recently, explaining what they do.
At the GEC, we have a mission, and the mission is to counter foreign and state and non-state propaganda, disinformation, the whole category you might call information manipulation that goes on around the world, primarily by Russia and China. That's what we're here to counter. We do that in a number of ways. We have programs all over the world, over 100 programs, essentially to identify disinformation before it can take hold in a big way, to expose disinformation before it can take hold, and to build resilience through helping journalists, organizations, all the stakeholders in all the countries where this disinformation happens.
Wow.
We help to build resilience against it.
Okay, so a couple things that he said there, right? He said, we're building resilience. We're going and stopping misinformation before it happens. We've got 100 projects that we're working on. We're reaching out to journalists to be helpful to them. We've got contacts with all the different stakeholders. Russia and China, they're the ones who are doing all of this stuff. And we're the good guys, right? That's him, James P. Rubin, special convoy for the GEC. Now, what is this entity? Now, where does it reside? Where does it exist? Its Twitter account is at the GEC. And as you can see here, they have the Department of State logo in their bio. They say, welcome to the official Twitter account of the State Department's The Global Engagement Center, exposing and countering foreign propaganda and disinformation. state.gov/GEC. And here, their mission is to direct, to lead, to synchronize, and to coordinate U.S. federal government efforts to recognize, understand, and expose state, foreign state, and non-state propaganda and disinformation efforts aimed at undermining and influencing. You see here, the person we just heard from is James Rubin, special counsel or special envoy and coordinator. And if we go back to their Twitter account, there's more here. This one was a retweet from USA Po-Ruski. It looks like this one is in Ukrainian. Another one from Global Engagement Center. They say, great partners help to ensure our national security. Going over and hanging out with the UK. No to war, 1 year in Ukraine. Right, so certainly this is not propaganda in any way. Like, they're not telling us either way who to support or not support. Right, this is to stop misinformation and to stop disinformation. Isn't that what they said over here? Let's see here. What is their mission? To synchronize, to recognize, and to counter foreign state and non-state propaganda. Okay. Well, to me, it's sort of this, I guess this, would the argument here be that this is anti-war, this is combating other things, or is this an affirmative statement? Very interesting things. Okay, so here's another, they put disinformation roulette, the Kremlin's year of lies, to justify an unjust war. All right, so that's the background. Okay, that's what they do. This is their Twitter account. Tons of information on misinformation on Twitter or in the socials. So I guess this is what they do. They repost tweets. When the West stands together, we are united with resolve. Okay, if we go back over now to the official Twitter Files 17 thread. Twitter Files 17, new knowledge. The Global Engagement Center and state-sponsored blacklists. By Matt Taibbi, at @mtaibbi on Twitter. He says, on June 2nd, 2021, an analyst at the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab, ACDFR, good Lord, they wrote to Twitter. So some entity sends a letter. Here's what it looks like. From Andy, June 18, 2021, 11 a.m. late morning. Andy sends a letter over to Twitter copying our friend Yoel Roth, who was the head of trust and safety. Sends it to Graham Brookie, who don't know what that email address is, why that would be redacted out. He says, hi guys, Andy writes. Hi guys, attached you will find a spreadsheet of around 40,000 Twitter accounts that our researchers suspect are engaging in inauthentic behavior in support of the BJP and Hindu nationalism more broadly. You go, holy moly, 40,000 Twitter accounts? Andy Carvin over to Twitter. And DFR Lab, so DFR Lab is going to be, Digital Forensic Research Lab. So we'll talk more about them. Where are they coming from? They came up with this list, 40,000 names. They said it suspected 40,000 accounts of being, quote, paid employees or possible volunteers of India's BJP party. 40,000 paid volunteers or paid people or volunteers? That's a lot of people for this thing. But the list that was sent over by this DFR Lab, right? And that's DFR Lab is not DFR Lab, right? We're going to see who that is in a minute. But the list was full of ordinary Americans, many with no connection to India and no clue about Indian politics. Who's on the list? These are people on the list. And it looks like they've got Twitter accounts, not protected, images, they've got posts, maybe follower counts, retweet counts, right? This is some entity, DFR Labs, whoever that is, which we're going to learn about, who's tracking, sounds like Americans, full of ordinary Americans. Interesting. So Matt gave some people a call. He called Bobby Hailstone. Are you working with an Indian political party, sir? Matt says. Bobby, he says, I have no connection to any Hindu folks. All right. No, I don't have no to any Hindu folks. Just a Reagan Republican here in Connecticut, he said. Shout out to Bobby Hailstone from Connecticut. Lady D1816. Taibbi said, excuse me, lady, are you a Hindu terrorist nationalist? Are you planning on insurrecting India? She said, a Hindu nationalist? What? I've never even been out of this country, let alone the state of New Jersey. Poor lady. What the heck are you talking about? So Taibbi calls Krista Woods and says, are you a Hindu terrorist? And she says, these people are insane. And you go, yeah, that's true. Krista, you're all right. So shout out to Lady D1816 from New Jersey, and shout out to Krista Woods, Hindu terrorists, according to DFR Labs. So now Twitter agreed, okay, Twitter actually recognized that they're not Hindu terrorists, said that one reason many of the accounts remain active is because they're not terrorists. Thanks, Andy, replied Trust and Safety Chief. So Andy's the guy who sent this email. Hey, we got 40,000 people that we'd like you to nuke. Turns out they're just everyday Americans. Yoel responded. He said, thanks, Andy. Yeah, we received that one. Appreciate you sending it over. Look forward to discussing this in a bit more depth. I spot checked a number of these, and virtually all appear to be real people. So we're not going to be nuking 40,000 Twitter accounts off of our platform. Thanks, though. And so it continues. Matt writes, now DFR Lab is funded not by private entities or customers or charitable donations. No. DFR Lab is funded by the U.S. government. Where does that come from? Oh, yeah, specifically the GEC, the Global Engagement Center, with Mr. Rubin we just heard from. So he says, Director Graham Brookie denies that DFR Lab uses tax money to track Americans, saying that its grants have an exclusively international focus. All right. That's how they do this. Oh, no. Like the FISA 702 stuff, right? Oh, no, FISA is only for foreign people. But if you pick up the phone and call your relative in the Middle East and they gobble that data up for whatever reason, because because maybe that person is related to terrorists, or hypothetically, I'm not talking about you specifically, but if that were the case, that U.S. citizens' data would still be gobbled up. But they're saying it's even beyond that, right? That these FISA abuses were not even monitoring just calls that had probable cause where maybe you were calling a terrorist, but also calls if you're just calling your grandma over there. They're saying, oh, what are you doing over there? Okay, that sounds okay. but we still need to listen to those calls. And if yours gets gobbled up, they just sort of paper over it after the fact. They just say, well, we'll just hide his first name and his phone number. And they'll, redact the rest of it out, but you're still in the database. And Thomas Massie made the point. He said, well, if that's just incidental collection, but you collect it incidentally for everybody all the time, everywhere, is it really incidental anymore, or is it everything? So you can never believe this, right? Yeah, okay, the money goes for one purpose, but it's used for everything else. But Americans on DFR list, like the people we just heard from, those Hindi terrorists, like Maricel Urbanik, are unconvinced that they were focusing on exclusively international people. Jersey Girl conservative at Urbanik Maricel, probably worth a great follow, says, love the Lord, my family in America, Christian conservative, DJT supporter, believes in MAGA, no amnesty, build a wall, and improve healthcare, hashtag MAGA. Yeah, sounds like a nice lady. Here you can see, she said this is un-American. She immigrated from Castro's Cuba. They do this in places that don't believe in free speech, she says. Yeah, that's true. Like America. We believe in it. Our federal government does not. Matt Taibbi says, the Global Engagement Center is usually listed as a State Department entity. And of course, they do that, right? Even on their Twitter account, as we saw. When you go up there, they actually use the State Department logo right there. Department of State, Global Engagement Center. That's kind of where it seems like it would fit, right under the State Department. But Taibbi tells us it's not. It's not where it belongs. Created in Obama's last year, the Global Engagement Center is an interagency group, quote, within the state, whose initial partners also included the FBI, DHS, NSA, CIA, DARPA, Special Operations Command, SOCOM, and others. So it looks more like this. They're not actually tucked in the State Department. It's an interagency department that gets to gobble up data from all the different entities, aggregate them, and process them. Taibbi continues. He says, the GEC mandate, he writes, to recognize, understand, expose disinformation, right? We read that from their mission statement. On the surface now, it's the same mission that the USIA, the information agency, has used for decades, except with a catch. The USIA is focused on foreign disinfo. The GEC's is much wider. They write, the Secretary of State, the Secretary, shall establish a GEC, which shall lead the coordination and integration and the synchronization of government-wide communication activities directed at foreign audiences abroad in order to counter messaging and international terrorist organizations. The executive director shall report to the secretary through the undersecretary for diplomacy. Taibbi gets a quote from another person. A former intelligence source says the following. The GEC? Oh yeah, it's an incubator for the domestic disinformation complex, right? You know all that foreign disinformation stuff that the ISIA was doing? What was the entity called? USIA. This is all just happening now domestically. All this stuff that we pulled in other countries, says this former intelligence source, everything since the Cold War. Yeah, some morons decided to bring that here and to bring that home. The GEC now could have avoided controversy by focusing on exposing and answering disinformation. They could have done that with research, a more public approach, just like the USIA did. But instead, Matt says it funded a secret list of subcontractors and it helped pioneer an insidious and idiotic new form of blacklisting. In this email, GEC asks Twitter to review 499 accounts as foreign disinformation. Why were they disinformation? Oh yeah, they used that app called Signal to communicate, and they used a hashtag. Here is what this message says, being sent over to Twitter. Hall Monitor GEC, which is actually basically a propaganda machine now. They say, hey, Twitter, we've got a problem. These accounts use one of these hashtags. Iranians debate with Biden. Biden bypassed the mullahs. Talk to us. Your turn, Israel. Pay us back for Cyrus. All those hashtags. They say that the Twitter campaign was organized in a private Telegram channel, which, by the way, if you haven't joined as a member on YouTube or on Locals, you'll get access to that private Telegram channel, ours, not this one here. It says that it was here on this account whose messages were spread to larger public Telegram groups. And then they were spread on tweets. And the goal was coordination. And so they gave him 3 example messages in this data set. They sent over a bunch of, looks like Telegram accounts and other Twitter searches. So they're identifying them. Here are the 5,500 names that the GEC told Twitter it believed were Chinese accounts engaged in, quote, state-backed coordination manipulation. Matt says it takes about negative 10 seconds to find these non-Chinese figures. Look at this name right here. Jenny CNN. Is Jenny CNN actually a Jenny from CNN? Let's see if it is. Oh no, the account was suspended. Maybe it was, I don't know. Here, so it says Jenny CNN. I don't know what this was. So that account was actually suspended. Did they suspend this one? All right, I better just keep reading. I'm getting ahead of myself here. It says GEC's Chinese list included multiple Western government accounts and at least 3 CNN employees based abroad. Okay, there you go. Not exactly Anderson's besties, but CNN assets, if you will, quipped Patrick Conlon. A total crock, added Trust and Safety Chief Yoel Roth. So they did look these people up, and I don't know why that account is suspended. As in CNN, they said, here's a looks like maybe a message. Yeah, the account Jenny CNN, which is the work account for digital features editor for CNN. Also, this person is a correspondent for CNN and Serbian News. Oh, and this person is a CNN China correspondent. They're not necessarily Anderson's besties, but CNN assets, if you will. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that account is actually suspended. So here you go. Jenny CNN is actually suspended. I just clicked that one, which is weird. Like I wasn't expecting that. I don't know what that's about. Let's see if Matt answers that. He says, now the GEC, because that makes it seem like maybe, did she do something after this or did they actually suspend her? I don't know. Matt writes, GEC passed some good information to Twitter, right? They did some good work, but mostly not. The root problem was exemplified by a much circulated 2020 report, Russian Pillars of Disinformation and Propaganda. Here's their report. Pillars of Russia's Disinformation and Propaganda Ecosystem. They write, how Russia's disinformation spreads, the media multiplier effect. January 2020, you have somebody, Zvezda TV interviews an expert, then the narrative spreads on social media, then it goes over to RT, Sputnik, and Amplify, then it goes over, then in February, wow, they've got all these like little COVID particles on here. I wonder how much they paid for this. That's very expensive. I wonder what that cost for somebody to copy and paste a couple of COVID graphics on that report, probably a few $1 million. Matt says, this GEC report was contradictory. On the one hand, it offered reasoned evidence that a specific outlet like the Strategic Culture Foundation was partnered with the Russian ministry, which would make it a true proxy site. They say, okay, that was kind of true. Maybe some evidence about that. But in the same report, there was a far lazier idea, says Matt. Along with state actors, groups that, quote, generate their own momentum. What? Groups that generate their own momentum should also be considered as parts of the propaganda ecosystem. Independents, the GEC said, should not confuse those trying to discern the truth. Okay, so like if you had like just a group of people who all like shared ideas and like they started a community and like they called themselves like, I don't know, like Watching the Watchers or something like that. If that was like a generating like your own like, you know, like group of people, would they say that that is part of the propaganda ecosystem? Groups that generate their own momentum. Huh, let's see what this says. It says, understanding the Russian disinformation and ecosystem. Yes, they have proxy unattributed communication channels. Yeah, like that, because they want to be able to go and ban you even if they can't connect you to Russia. Like, what good is it? What good is totalitarian power to ban everybody on social media if you're only limited to like one type of conversation? You also want to go get all of the unattributed communication channels, like, for example, the CNN anchors that they gobbled up in that communication. They say that the GEC has developed the ecosystem concept as a way to contextualize the various threats posed by Russia, and that the ecosystem approach is well suited to reinforce Russia's general aims of disrupting democracy. All right, we know how that goes. They write, there are official government communications that the GEC focuses on. There are state-funded global messaging systems. There are cultivation of proxy sources. There are infiltration of domestic conversations. Oh boy. Do we have any Russian infiltrators in the chat infiltrating our conversations? And then cyber-enabled disinformation. This is what they're working on. Now, at the bottom, you see this nice little chart here. These are visible. You can see at the bottom, these are the things that stand out. But over here, these are denied, right? You can't really see these things. These are obscured. The connection to Russia is obscured. One of the more ugly PowerPoints that I've ever seen, but you know, it is from the government, so that's about what you'd expect. Now, the ecosystem, says Matt, is not a new concept. It's been with us since Salem. It's called guilt by association. Yeah. If you're a Republican who voted for Trump, you know what that looks like. Or if you even thought about Trump, you know what that looks like. As one Twitter exec put it, if you retweet a news source linked to Russia, you become a Russia linked. Does not exactly resonate as a sound research approach. As always, any info share is appreciated. They said their methodology is apparently if you retweet a news source, you're Russia. Doesn't resonate very well. The GEC sent Twitter a series of reports on a series of topics, often employing the ecosystem concept. They sent a report over to Twitter. They said, oh yeah, you know those yellow vest movements? Russia hackers. And the response was, so they sent this over. They said, hey, this is an executive summary. This report presents an analysis of conversations on social media, top accounts on here. They sent this report. Russia-linked Twitter accounts continue to sow discord. So, you know, these are all basically fake stories, right, that they're creating. There's no legitimacy to it. They're just gobbling up a bunch of names. They're putting them in nice reports. They're sending these reports out to the media. This executive summary is looked into. Did a few spam suspensions. They say none of these were suspicious. No, we aren't going to remove Sputnik France. Okay, not going to do that. High volumes of tweets are not bots. Being a bot is not a TOS violation. Same as the previous report. Stop bothering us about the yellow vests. Russia linked to Italy. Not a big deal there. More entertainment value, this Russia linked to China conversation. Also nothing really useful there. So they call it, you know, more entertainment value than anything. Matt continues. He tells us, now, Twitter staffers did have professionalism. They tended to look at them at least once before declaring something disinformation. Now, this made them a tough crowd for the GEC. GEC said, why are you not removing these people? We sent you 40,000 names and you're not removing them. We sent you these names. We're not removing them. Why are you not removing Sputnik France and others? But they didn't need to do that. They didn't need Twitter to actually play ball. All they had to do was go over to the news media because they knew the news media would take anything that had the headline Russia, Trump, anything like that and run hog wild with it. And they did. So the GEC's game, says Matt, was to create an alarmist report, just like we saw previously. Remember when we saw that alarmist report about Hunter Biden's laptop? You're all being inundated with Russian disinformation. Remember that? Because that was very useful to them. It helped to craft a political narrative that got their guy in a much better position than he would have otherwise. Send it to slower animals, says Matt, in the journalism herd, all those copy pasters that are just there every day, just copy, pasting, copy, pasting, copy, pasting. Send it over to them and wait as they started banging on Twitter's door, demanding to know why their ecosystem of the Russians isn't being obliterated. Twitter emails ooze with frustration at the queries. Here's one that came in from Amanda Seltz. Hey, Katie, hope you had a nice weekend. I wanted to follow up with you about those GEC Twitter accounts and see if you're able to determine if any of those accounts were taken down. Who is this person? Oh, this is Amanda Seitz. Okay, look at this individual. Fact check misinformation reporter from the Associated Press. Ugh. And she just took that GEC report and she's running wild with it. We have another one. This one. Hey, checking in here to see if there's more from the state. We've CNN onto us this evening. New rounds of this coming this morning about a Washington Post report. Hi, y'all. Hope you're well. Sorry to bug, especially on a weekend, but do you have a few minutes to chat? In short, I have the GEC report, or at least a version of it, and I wanted to get your thoughts. Blank is my number, traditional phone and signal. Thanks. Okay, so they just create these fake reports and the media goes crazy. Thanks, Joel. Appreciate you ignoring if you're comfortable. I already pointed him to your comments on CNN. They don't need, right? They don't need truth. They just need the fake stories to be in the media. So Twitter disagreed with the GEC alert about the Russian disinfo in South America. As Roderick put it, I believe what they mean is there was a surge of accounts that agreed with Moscow-aligned narratives. They confused cause and effect. So that, people are starting to talk about Moscow. They're thinking Moscow is causing it, not the other way around. Big long email there from Aaron Rodericks. But Roth noted that Brett Schaefer of the Alliance for Securing Democracy, which we've heard about here, they've been involved in other Twitter files. Says seems like ASD are back at their old tricks again. So there were multiple entities that were doing the same game. This email comes from Yoel Roth to Aaron Rodericks, Nick Pickles, and others at Twitter. January 20th, 2020. We've got an election coming up. Says strong +1 to everything Aaron said. It's certainly true that Russia operates an influence operation in Latin America, principally via Spanish language RT, which is the highest engagement RT globally. Without more evidence to back up more dramatic claims, I don't think there's much we want to do here. That said, flagging this a bit for Nick. Seems like the Alliance for Securing Democracy are back at their old tricks again, despite the merits of the new Hamilton. And the ASD was basically doing the same thing, right? Creating a bunch of allegations. They had the proprietary algorithm that they were saying. Yeah, here it is. Roth was referring to the fact that ASD created Hamilton 68, another guilt by association scheme detailed in Twitter Files 15, which we covered here. The Hamilton dashboard claimed to track accounts linked to Russian influence activities, but it was made up of Americans. We covered that one previously. Right, here's the bot. Alliance for Securing Democracy. Anybody who said MAGA, you see here, top hashtags, MAGA, is a tweet, a bot, and a troll, according to these people, spreading dangerous misinformation. Now, the Hamilton 68 dashboard creator, J.M. Berger, was on the GEC payroll until June of 2017, just before they launched. Hamilton claimed the list was the fruit of 3 years of observation and denies working for Hamilton. Says, I checked my records and I need to correct the timeline. I worked for GEC as a contractor through June 2017, not January. I emphasize again that I unequivocally deny that my work on the dashboard was directed by the GEC, nor was it coordinated with the GEC in any way. At no point in this project did GEC have any input whatsoever. Matt says that the Hamilton 68 dashboard employed digital alchemy to create streams of headlines, tying Americans to foreign disinformation. The ecosystem reports GEC and many disinformation laboratories feed reporters are just often subtler versions of the same thing. Yeah. Okay, so here, right, this is just a smattering of all the headlines, and you remember these. Russia bots influencing Twitter as hashtag walk away gains steam. Shuttered Facebook, anti-immigrant rallies, right? All of these are sort of titles that Matt has gobbled up for us. Here's another list. Twitter suspends Chinese-backed accounts that spread propaganda. Twitter takes down Beijing-backed influence operations. China spends billions of dollars on Russia's disinformation, and other tweets. Now, Matt says that in a crucial in-house Q&A, mid-2017, Roth was asked if you could detect Russian fingerprints on Twitter. Can you identify those Russians on there based on what they're posting? Is it technologically possible to do that? He says no. In short, no. Although you can make inferences based on public data, Google's access from the fire hose is broader, including any academics, but still tough. The most likely way they could have identified something on Twitter that they pointed out, basically saying it's not really possible to do it. So Twitter, therefore, says Matt, knew from the first days of foreign interference that the media was being flooded with bad actors. All of these people were just creating stories that were not real. The GEC has doubled their budget by overstating the threats through unverified accusations that nobody can even replicate. Because they just come up with the list. Like Twitter was not at this time publicly confirming or denying this, right? If they would have said, if Twitter would have come out and been honest about this, if the GEC would have published their report about all of this Russian hack, Russia, and Twitter came out and said, this is all fake, this is all a lie, we've done our own analysis. Like, why didn't Yoel Roth come out and say all of this publicly? He could have come out and combated these statements. Twitter could have rebutted all of those statements, but they didn't do it. Why? Because they were okay with it, man. They were okay with this type of censorship happening. This gave them carte blanche to do whatever the hell they wanted. They did it at useful effect for them. GEC got paid a ton of money. Another entity popped up called New Knowledge. This was a scandal-plagued company backed by former NSA officials that the Senate Select Committee used to do expert analyses on Facebook and Twitter accounts. When Twitter saw New Knowledge and its reporter, and they worshiped certain disinformation gurus, they knew something was off. Politico cited a New Knowledge report as evidence for what it called sweeping efforts to sow divisions. Twitter dug in. Reports show that Russia mounted sweeping efforts to sow divisions. But Yoel says, no, that's not true. Bots from the same botnets appear to still be active, and they're relatively easy to find. These accounts have similar patterns. Although these bots are not doing anything malicious now, they could be in the future. 2 of the 5 accounts were just small Indonesian content farms, just generic old commercial spam, nothing even suspicious. But this other company called New Knowledge, they would pick accounts that they deemed to be controlled and then spin up bigger macro analyses. So they'd find like a small batch and then spin that up into a bigger story. Nick Pickle says, thanks, Yoel, for the turnaround on that. Says, for everyone's wider awareness, this goes to the heart of New Knowledge's pitch. They pick accounts that they have deemed to be controlled and they spin up a bigger macro analysis of their activity. So when we saw stories about 2,000 Russian accounts tweeting about Kavanaugh walkaway caravan, it was often based on media activity from NK. And just like Hamilton, they also littered the media with flat out wrong stories. Support for Brett Kavanaugh seems especially high among Russian propagandists. No, it was not. That's not true, right? They were just making all of that up. CNN had a story too. Russian bots are using hashtag walkaway to try to wound the Democrats in the midterms. No, they weren't. There weren't any Russian bots, but this was very useful to make Russia the enemy. I mean, isn't this weird? This was in 2018. I mean, Russia has been the subject of fake propaganda. Like, this is not real. This is not real. They just made it up. It's been weird how it's always been Russia for so long. Now, particularly egregious, Taibbi says, a New Knowledge report to the Senate on Russian interference was leaked just days before it was outed in a scheme to fake Russian influence in an election. No comments, no corrections. All of this was not real. A new report on Russian disinformation prepared for the Senate shows the operation's scale and sweep. New report on Russian disinfo shows the operation's scale. Russia is sowing divisions. Turns out none of this is true. Look at all these stories. That's like a New York Times story. Looks like NPC, Politico, NPR, Axios. They all got this fake news, really. Matt says foreign cyber threats exist and there are sophisticated ways to detect them. Yeah. But GEC and its subcontractors, they don't use those. Instead, they use junk science and they lump in true bad actors with organic opinion. He says that disinformation studies, so-called, has mostly become a con. Non-experts mesmerize reporters with what one former GEC staffer calls hairball charts, usually measuring something idiotic like who follows 2 Chinese diplomats or shares an Iranian Free Palestine meme. Yeah, so here's what they do, right? They bring all these charts together and they say, look, we've done sophisticated data analysis. And we've found that Putin is right here. He's in control of this little blob right here. We got to go take those accounts out. Here's another meme, right? The memes, the election jokes, voting on Wednesday jokes, they're all illegal. So the Washington Examiner and others are downgrading other stories, blacklisting conservative news sites. An IG report shows that the GEC, they initially got almost $100 million, and about 80 million of that came from the Pentagon. Oh my gosh. It reportedly gave to at least 39 different organizations, and their names were redacted. So the GEC is paying money out to other people to do this type of work, and we don't know where that money's going. Democracy Council of California, CNA Corporation, Park Capital Investment Group. This is the government using federal tax dollars to censor and suppress other Americans. That is literal government action violating constitutional rights in this country. It's sick. Twitter comms official Ian Plunkett wrote years ago that misinformation is becoming a cottage industry. Disinformation is the counterterrorism mission rebranded for domestic targets. Like CVE before it, misinformation is now being turned around on us. Matt says, reauthorization for the GEC's funding is up for a vote this year. Can we at least stop paying to blacklist ourselves? Can we do that? We stop funding them so they stop censoring us? Matt says the Twitter files were prepared by a third party. Others will have more this month, including Schellenberger. Make sure you're following him. He says, note, just before the publication, Graham Bookey of the DFR Lab, which was sort of the subsidiary of the GEC, they got paid by the GEC, wrote to clarify about the 40,000 names. He says, we didn't publish this from a former researcher because we lacked confidence in its findings. And that he got corrected on that, I guess. Interesting correction. I asked Bookey if he made his lack of confidence clear to the Reuters reporter whose story is based on the report. He hasn't replied. Yeah, that's exactly right. These people could have all corrected the record when it was ready and available for them to do so. They didn't do it because they let it stay because it was useful for them. So he says, wow, okay, Taibbi is going to be testifying on Thursday, March 9th at 10 a.m., which we're probably going to have to cover that live. So we'll add that to our calendar, and we'll very likely be covering that. What is that next? When is that date? 1 week from today. Wow, okay. So we'll put that on the calendar. That's going to be Matt Taibbi. Very, very fun. That should be interesting. Of course, that is, my friends, Twitter Files 17, courtesy of Matt Taibbi. We recommend you follow him, of course, to get the full story, the full picture. There's a lot we didn't cover there. In the detail in the documents if you want to go look at those further. But there will be more. Matt Taibbi will be testifying in front of Congress. We'll, of course, continue to cover it. Thank you for liking this video, subscribing here on this channel, wherever it is you're watching it, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.